Hi, Cecil. Hi, Angelo.
Hi.
Frank.
Hi,
Hi,
Patty.
Phil.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
I'll chime in and just say hello. I'm filling in for Steve Corbel tonight, so hi to everybody. I haven't seen you in a little while, but I hope everyone's doing well.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, everything's up and running. So the first committee portion here is planning and zoning. If Mr. Burley, if you're ready, I don't have a report.
Oh,
from manager's
yes.
Update.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, I don't have anything to add for manager's update, just what's on my notes. So there's really nothing to say about any of them. So you can move on from me.
Okay, sounds well. Don, are you ready to
Yeah, I'm here.
talk to us? Okay.
You ready?
Yes, sounds good.
Okay. Yeah, I just have one item for tonight. In case you didn't notice, we have some dead trees in the median that were planted by PennDOT. So I called our arborist to check them out to see if it was because of the heat and no water when we had those hot days, or if the trees are dead. So I'm waiting for him to give me an answer. So I just want to let you know on that. So that's about all I have.
Okay, thanks, Don. Under our committee business report, there's a social bar committee committee and zoning report that was presented by Mr. Marco.
Hello. Thank you. Did you all receive the document? I'm sorry I didn't get to send it around until today. I had intended to send it sooner. But we have had a review of our zoning ordinances by SoulSmart. It was done by a group of Chatham students in the spring semester. And they have made a recommendation for not too many revisions, but a couple of them. I don't know if I can screen share and we can go through this on the screen. Mr. Morris, can I get a screen share?
Well, okay. I think we've already seen this.
Did you all receive it?
I
Yes.
mean, we received it, and I think we've discussed this at a previous meeting, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, we didn't ever take any action saying whether we wanted to adopt any of these. And I don't know if you wanted to do that. There were a couple of definitional changes that they wanted to put in, and there are the accessory uses, allowing a little longer, a little more variation in the setback requirements to allow for optimum placement of ground mounted units. I thought people wanted to look at those in more detail and tell me whether they wanted to adopt them or not. So I wanted to put this on here to have an opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I don't know about anybody else. I read it actually twice, unbelievably. But everything that was in there seemed just pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
Do, especially, in light of us wanting to be more progressive in the solar area.
Well, and I thought, given that we're putting in a great deal of solar in our own borough buildings, and that the Inflation Reduction Act in particular offers a considerable incentive to homeowners and small businesses, I thought we ought to expedite the availability of these changes. So I don't know what we need to do to ask that these be incorporated into our zoning ordinance. Is that something that Mr. Corbel would do for us?
Yes.
So
Sorry,
please go ahead.
the next step, pass it on to Mr. Corbel for
Yeah.
review to make sure we don't, any red flags that he would see would be my thought.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so that would,
we took a initial look at this, but we haven't provided a complete review of it. But we
Okay.
can certainly provide a full review of their proposed changes and put it into the correct format for your consideration.
because I think we have to adopt it at a business meeting. Is that correct? Yeah, it says
You would need to, yes, and typically you would authorize our review of it further at your next meeting. So if that,
Well, I'd like to authorize that at our business meeting. And then have it available to act on at our next business meeting, if that would be okay.
you should be able to, some of these changes are going to be within your zoning ordinance.
Yeah,
So they would be required to be submitted to the county for review. The county
Oh,
requires
okay.
45 days. And
Okay.
then after we receive their comments, we need to advertise twice. So you
Okay.
probably could look at maybe an August adoption potentially.
okay, all right. Well, if you could give these to Mr. Corbel and put that process in motion, I would appreciate that. I don't think it requires any other action from us. We already adopted the solar policy statement that preceded this at a prior meeting. So I think all we needed was the next steps of legal review, and I guess the county has 45 days to comment. I doubt they're going to object because they've adopted a number of these in other places. I think Etna has adopted them and Dormont. Those two, I'm pretty sure. I'm not sure about anyone else.
So we'll review, and then if
Okay.
you want to have at your next business meeting to authorize us to advertise and send it to the county. That would
Yeah,
be-
so can we do that on Wednesday, a week from Wednesday? Is there any reason we couldn't?
Not to my understanding, the manager, if there's any issues with adding that to the agenda, there's nothing from a legal standpoint.
Okay. All right, then Steve, could you add that to the agenda for our next business meeting so we can put this in motion with our attorneys and get this moving so it doesn't get held up anymore?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. I think that's all I had on this matter, unless anyone had any questions.
Thanks, Patty.
Mhm.
Okay, and next there's Mr. Lawrence wants to talk about formalizing handling tree issues and problems. Hello? Mr. Lawrence?
Yes, Steve.
Yeah, okay. You wanted to talk
Yeah.
about tree and problem issues, handling tree issues?
Yeah, I'm trying to, you caught me off guard and I forgot what that subject was.
Oh, that's
Um,
all right. Uh-huh.
Yeah, well, I apologize. I forget what the point was now. My mistake.
Mr. Lawrence, was
Yeah.
that something about the handling of emergency versus routine tree
Oh,
maintenance?
my goodness. Yeah, thank you. Not a good sign, is it? Yeah, one of the questions I had was, I believe when we're handling, just to bring up the issue, I believe when we have any emergency trees that have to be taken down or limbs cut down, it's automatically going to Carl's. And I wondered if there was a way that we could review that and perhaps consider another put it out for another maybe for bid to other vendors. Anyone have thoughts on that? Because I know that we're spending a lot of money on these emergency calls, and there may be other vendors that might be interested in bidding for that. How
Well,
could
I mean,
we go forward?
I don't see anything wrong with checking to see if the prices have changed and if there is a cheaper way to get the job done.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I thought the point was that when we do Carl's or whoever, we bid out the tree service requirements for a year and we have people bid for the collective action. And then if we did them individually for each situation in the rows, it would likely be more expensive. Is that the case?
If I could jump in just for a minute, I
Yeah,
think
go
it's more of a situation where what are we calling emergencies? So there may be some instances where we're calling things an emergency where it could have waited. I'm not sure, but I thought that was more of the situation than anything else.
Yeah, I think what brought it up was the tree that was wrapped around the fire hydrant. Now that was important to handle, but it wasn't. Didn't have to be done in 12 hours, and that was very expensive. I just wondered if we could look at that. I don't know whether we could even consider breaking out the two. I don't know. It's just something to put on the table. I looked at the price of that, and that's quite high.
Well.
Was the
can I-
cost on that, Mr. Lenz?
I don't remember
Yeah.
now. Offhand.
Yes, Steve?
Yeah, I don't remember the cost either, but you're gonna have to define, I guess, what you mean, because you can't just.
Um.
If you bid out emergency, for example, that the price of anything is gonna be set based on what the emergency is and what the tree is, the size of the tree, the kind of equipment they have to get out. So probably my guess is none of these contractors are going to give you a specific bid that you're going to be able to
Yeah.
use. You could certainly get somebody else other than Carl's as your emergency, service, but I don't think you're going to be able to get them to specify price. Now, you already have bids every year on removals and pruning. And you can use maybe that contractor, whoever wins that bid. But again, realize when they're making their bid, they're also making it based on a list of trees that Mr. Branzel has given them based on conversations with the Tree and Shrub Committee. So if you're adding something like, for example, the tree with the fire hydrant that you didn't have on the original list, that's going to be dependent on that particular situation. It doesn't mean that whoever gave you that original bid is going to be able to give you the same price on that one tree, depending on how where it's located, how hard it is to get in there, what equipment they need, et cetera.
Okay. Now, maybe it's just something to keep in mind and bring up when we do put out for bid the next time. I don't understand enough of the process.
Yes.
It just struck me.
Yes, Angelo? Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, just a recent tree removal incorporated concrete work as well. And that was given to Carl's. So, I mean, I understand the tree work. I don't really understand the concrete work. That probably should have been bid out to a company that does concrete work.
Yeah, I think we ought to revisit the whole thing next time everything comes up for bid. And I don't remember the exact price, but I think that entire work on Lennox was well over $30,000, at least about $30,000. Tree alone was 15. The concrete was approximately, I think the concrete was 17, but don't quote me on that. So, okay, I'll just suggest that we consider these issues as we bid out the next time. That's all. Thanks.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. Anything else left for planning and zoning? Okay, then we're done, Steve.
Okay, I'm ready to go with finance, Mr. Marco, whenever you are.
Yes, please. We
Okay.
have a cash flow report, and I would like your comments on that, please.
Sure. Let me make a few comments first, if you would. This is the graph page that I always give you for the cash flow, and it's through May 31st. So we ended May with $1.19 million in cash at that particular point in time. And if you look at the chart for May, at the bottom, the numbers, it's the second lowest amount we've had entering June, coming from May into June. It's something that, again, I think you need to make sure you continue to cautiously make spending decisions for this year. Don't forget, it doesn't take into account how we ended 2022. And just for some comparison, like I did last month, at the end of May, overall revenues compared with a year ago are down. Real estate current year compared with a year ago is down. Deed transfer tax compared with a year ago is down. Now, the one good thing is expenditures compared with a year ago are also down. So that's a positive from the point of view of finances. And I again urge you to take a look every time you get the treasurer's report. And by that, I mean not the one page thing that or 2 pages that we stick on the borough's agenda for a council meeting, but the detailed information, like for example, that, which I think you should be seeing on your screen. This is a little bit different print version of the detailed information, but this is the, for example, revenues as of May 31st. And usually you get some kind of format like that. And what I always do every month when we get this is I take a look at the comparison in this column between last year and this year. And that's what these numbers over here mean. That's not something that's done as part of your report. This is something I just add to it in my Excel spreadsheet. It's something that, again, you need to be you need to consider. And last thing I would say before Ms. DeMarco says anything is that at the end of June, you'll be 50% through the year. And while this is not a rule or a law or anything like that, sometimes people will take a look at their budgets at the end of the year, at the end of the 6 months, and take a look and see where they are. Are certain line items above 50% or below 50% of your budget? Now, that's not a great way to look at things. It's a simple way, though, and it might give you some insights. It might also give you some cautions. Don't forget, though, that if you do that, there are some items, for example, real estate tax, where collection is done early in the year. So if that's over 50%, for example, that doesn't necessarily mean anything at the end of June, because you should expect that to be mainly in. But that is something else you could take a look at when you get the numbers in July for June. And if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll
Well,
be
Steve,
quiet.
I am a little concerned about the real estate taxes and the fact that we had a number of appeals due to the assessment challenges. And I don't know if we're expecting to receive an increase in the collections as they are resolved. Do we know where that stands?
Well, I get what's called disposition notices from the county frequently, and it
Mhm.
lets me know the result of various appeals and who made the appeal. Often it's the school district. Now, I haven't had one for Forest Hills in a while, and the last time I had one, we were still ahead of ahead by numbers. In other words, a lot of the appeals either were not successful, they were maintaining the same number. Some of them did have the assessed value go up. Now, the question is, what will change when people appeal that under the court ruling? If it will change, and there's no way of knowing that. But I would also mention, if you recall, when we were doing the budget, you all, I think it was you, Patty, and also Marcus, suggested that I build in some buffers, and I did do that. I don't know, how accurate they were, but I did put in some buffers in the budgeted number for real estate tax.
Okay, I would just like to look at two things. One, we have a outlay commitment for our Siemens contract. Now that's coming mostly out of capital. And we have not transferred that money to make that payment yet, as I understand it. Is that correct?
Yes.
I talked to Allison about that. Okay. So if it looks like we're going to be getting too tight, could we do that payment in two pieces instead of all at once?
Well, okay,
I know
maybe
that
I'm
they-
kind of fuzzy on Siemens, I guess, and not always sure if I understand what's going on. But it seems to me that we're going to talk about that under committee of the whole, that $333,000, that's the initial thing, is being sent to the organization, and I don't even know who that was, that is loaning us money through the bond issue. And
Yeah.
they're going to pay that money to Siemens that is owed. So it's not really even going to
That's
be
our share.
touched by the borough, as far as I know.
Okay, so we have to give that over and they disperse it as they see fit. So we don't have the option of doing that in pieces.
Well, no, and realize too that nothing with Siemens was added into the capital improvements plan, because that was approved in December, and at the time nobody knew where things were going with that. So there are things in there that you can use, but again, realize too that we had a lot of projects just for 2023 alone in the capital plan that probably cannot be met. So Siemens isn't figured in there necessarily. You can say that you're taking money, for example, out of, well, yeah, I guess you're not using the lodge, so that's not a good example with Siemens. But let's say you were using the lodge, you could take money out of the lodge and say that's your Siemens money, but there's not a whole lot in there necessarily that relates directly to that based on what Siemens did, because we didn't at the time know what was going on as far as Siemens was concerned.
Mr. Morris, I had a question, please.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Barb.
Barb, you're frozen, I think.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go.
All right, thank you. Yeah, my internet's going in and out. Sorry about that. So the real estate and deed transfer taxes, Don, we'll say 80,000. But if we're down overall 406, where do the other 320 lie that we're down? That's
What are the other? Oh, you're adding those two things up, in other words, and subtracting that from 406. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are other. I didn't have the time to. If I could have put the whole chart, I guess, attached. But for example, let's see, licenses and permits are down $1,100. Cable TV franchise is down $4,700. I mean, there are a few things that are up too, as far as revenues are concerned. I'm looking here. The pool is down $16,429. That's again through the end of May, so that that's just opening up. It may not necessarily be a big deal, and that's where some of the money's coming from. Miscellaneous is down significantly, as well, several $100,000. That's partly though because of money, pension money that's being transferred back and forth into the reserve. So that's not necessarily a bad thing, but that's where some of the other numbers are coming for revenue.
But overall, isn't that, if you're looking at those numbers, if I'm reading it right, we're actually down $40,000, the difference between those two year to date?
I guess I'm not sure. Oh, between expenditures and revenue?
Yes.
Yeah, you could do that. Sure. Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And then could you tell me what you have the police, that's self-explanatory, is what's the reason for Public Works being up?
Okay, wait a minute. Let me pull up my expenses. I know Public Works overtime is down, so it's not that. And again, this is just the Public Works budget, not the other things like street maintenance, et cetera, that go with that. But things that are up in Public Works includes oh no, that's right, that's down. Overtime is down, I said. Yeah. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong numbers. Salaries are up a little bit. Salaries are up 21,000. I'm not sure if that's because we didn't calculate correctly. When was the contract settled? I don't remember. But maintenance on traffic signals is up. And that's probably up significantly. That's a good bit of the reason why it's 17,000. There's some other minor things that are up a few hundred to 1,000, like equipment rental is up about 1,700. So it's things like that.
So those are like goods and services and not necessarily salaries.
Yeah, and you'll see this when Allison sends you the monthly, because what she's going to send you is where I got these numbers. She'll be sending that to you before the meeting next month, next week. So, and my numbers too. I mean, she like I asked her this today, for example. So what I'm showing you through the end of May may not include every single thing that she has to enter. She thinks she balanced based on this, but there are other things that she may not have been able to enter for one reason or another. And so that could mean that the numbers you get a week later will be a little bit better looking than what I have.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else on cash flow? Again, my main thing is
I would-
just be cautious, please.
Yeah, I would just ask my colleagues that when we're looking at making expenditures for items that are not in the budget, and like actually in the budget book, that we have a rationale of why we're making expenditures that aren't in the budget and have a discussion about whether they can be deferred or put into the next year's budget, rather than to try to take them out of existing money, unless we can identify a place we can move it from, like one of the reserve funds, which we don't want to do down too far, but you know, if there are occasions when that might be appropriate.
So just realize too that the budget is not set in stone anywhere.
I
It is a
understand.
plan. And
Right.
so if we didn't, I mean, you can't say we didn't plan correctly because you can't predict the future, you know,
Right.
but because those are things that are estimates, you have to be aware of that. If something else goes over in expenditures, then that's going to take money from another fund or another line item. It's going to have to, unless you're going to borrow or, you know, think about raising fees somewhere or taxes or what have you. So. Anybody else?
I don't think we're at the point where we have to consider that at this time, so, okay. All right,
Anybody else? Okay, my second item, just a reminder that we're beginning the capital improvements plan process. And I want you to know that if you have any projects yourself, please talk to me about that or submit something to me so we can get it done. Take a look at the current plan that's in your budget book and see if there's things in there that you know, need changed or adjusted or what have you. I did ask Siemens, I think you folks had asked me that last month, to take a look at this and tell me how what they're doing should be included in our plan in the future. I haven't gotten anything back yet from them. So I don't know. If anybody is in contact with them, you might want to remind them that we're looking for something like that. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, sorry, my computer just started to freeze here. My the third item is that NLX documents that I gave you last month. If you recall, last year, I'm sorry, in 2020 rather, you renewed the WPEC. I forget what that stands for now. You renewed that contract for electrical supply procurement, and you asked me. This is what you see on the agenda are notes from last month. But the follow-up is the red line item at the bottom of page 1. You asked me to ask Siemens to look at it, and John Zeller did get back to me and said that they've agreed. They reviewed the agreement and agree that the borough continue with the extension for now.
this is a Western Pennsylvania Energy Consortium that
Thank
we're
you.
in with several other communities, I think 26 other communities, including the city of Pittsburgh. And what it does is it gives us a bulk purchase capacity for electricity service that is spread across 27 communities, including ourselves and the city of Pittsburgh, rather than for us having to negotiate individually one by one. It also has a renewable energy component to it that we could not afford on our own. And this is an extension of the contract that we're already in. We have the option to extend it for 1 year or 2 years. And I suggest that we do extend it to 2025 if you would like to take that option. I know that this would be likely to be beneficial to us because of the wholesale purchase capacity that we're going to be experiencing. There is a minimum purchase requirement in this contract, but I don't think that the efficiency upgrades and improvements that we're going to be making across all of our buildings will get us below that threshold for some time. Not for electricity anyway, for gas, I don't know, but at this point, I think it would be beneficial to us to do a 2-year extension onto this contract, and I would recommend that we do that.
So if the committee is okay with that, I would put a motion on the agenda for next
Exactly.
Wednesday. Does anybody have any objection to that? No? Okay, then the
Well, if you
only
could-
other item I'm sorry, what?
I said, if you could prepare that motion for
Yeah.
finance committee for next week, that would be great.
The only other item I had is just a reminder, we did talk to the actuary last week because they weren't available tonight. And so you reviewed the police calculation with them, and I was directed to return the document with their recommendation approved, which I did. I'm not sure if you want to formally ratify that next week. We could. You don't necessarily have to, but if you want me to, I'll put a motion on there.
I think just as a formality, we should approve it by vote so that it's in the public. record.
Okay, I'll put a motion on there
It's
too.
not controversial at all, and I think, everyone's questions were answered and it was, thoroughly discussed. I think just a vote ratifying the action would be.
Okay. Okay, I'll have a motion on there to ratify. That's all I have unless somebody has something for me.
So we need to vote on the disbursement of the $333,943 for mobilization and development for the Siemens contract. This is our share of the financing. A portion of that will be reimbursed when we actually implement our solar installations. We will get 30% of those costs back into that fund. And I think this was taken mostly from the Capital One reserve, if I recall correctly. We went through that a couple of different times. So that is something that we'll have to ratify by vote of council on next Wednesday. Does anyone have any concerns or objections about our contribution to the Siemens contract for the guaranteed savings obligations of 20-year performance contract? We're all good. Okay. There will be a construction management meeting, which I guess is going to be bi-weekly beginning this Thursday or maybe next Thursday. I don't remember. Barb, did you write down the date for that meeting with Siemens? We'll be having bi-weekly meetings with them. I think we're not this week, but the following week.
I think it's the week after.
Yeah, it's the week after this. So any of you who are interested, you're welcome to attend. Frank, you had a question.
So I believe that we ended that meeting with an agreement that we would have bi-weekly status meetings, but then there would also be a more infrequent like steer co meeting, right?
Right.
Have we established a cadence yet for that, or?
They would be willing to come to our council meetings and report at council meetings, as I understand it, just status update.
Okay.
Like we get from our engineers. The second item under committee business is that we have exactly received finally the notice to proceed from our DCED Active Transportation grant for $726,000 for the sidewalks and steps repair. I am anxious to know, we have to get McMahon in here to talk to us about what needs to happen in order to implement and execute that grant. Steve, have you talked to him since then?
No,
About-
not since last time when they were on the meeting.
Okay, I will follow up with that and see if he can get us a date for when they want to begin work on that. And that will be something that is especially, I think, important to start with the Avenue B steps, because those are the most important. They're in the worst shape in terms of safety conditions, and I think they would also contribute the most significance to the population that lives in that area for getting down not only to the bus stops, but also to the shopping, which is immediately below those steps. The third item regarding sewer treatment, sewer charge reimbursements and divided payment plans. This was put on the agenda by Ann Hockenberry.
Yeah, I could explain if you want me
Now,
to.
would you kindly, Steve? I had a
Yeah.
conversation with her today, but I'm not sure
This-
I even yet understand this.
This is fairly simple, but she gave me a detailed explanation, and this is a couple weeks old. That's the reason why you just got it today. There were some other issues going on here. But basically, and by the way, anytime we do there's a delinquent request, payment plan request, there is a policy that the council approved about 10 years ago, which I attached to your agenda. So you have that in front of you if you want it or need it. And basically it allows staff to make some decisions based on what's written in there. But it does say at the beginning that council should review that. And so we have a gentleman who's had some issues back and forth on with water shutoff and sewage. And part of the issue has been dealt with, has caused by the pandemic. And part of it was also caused by us in some respects, in that we got a little bit behind with the transition from having nobody in that position to do billing. If you recall, we were without anybody for a while, and then having Ann come in and take the position. So some things slipped through the crack with this gentleman, and that's the reason why Ann has submitted this detail to you. And she believes that as it says at the end, that she's recommending that we agree to the payment plan of $100 per month, but she also is recommending that we remove some of the penalties and past due amounts, partly because of the pandemic issue and partly because the borough was at fault, if you want to call it that, mainly because we didn't have somebody in that position. We were essentially had somebody doing double work, and that kind of slipped through a little bit. So if there's no objection, you don't need to vote on this. But if there's no objection, that's what Ann's recommending for Mr. Dobbs' plan.
And I understand that he's a landlord and some of this had to do with tenant issues that he's catching up on. Is that
Yes, yeah,
okay?
yeah.
So
Also,
he's a
he was out of town for a while.
yeah,
and
he's a
things like that, so-
responsible landlord trying to catch up with arrears on payments from tenants. So I think this is a perfectly acceptable, way forward. Does anyone have any questions or objections for this, or for having the staff move forward on this?
Yes, I have an objection in that we've had other folks that have come to us requesting us to waive fees, and we've not done that. And I mean, I don't have any problem with him having a payment plan, but there were a lot of people that had a problem during the pandemic. And I think we'd be setting a precedent by doing this. So I would be opposed to doing that. And furthermore, just to add that in looking at what our delinquent plan is, the policy there, that definitely needs to be updated. There's a lot of discrepancies in that policy.
Yeah, I was going to raise that after we had this discussion about Mr. Dobbs. Is there anyone else wanting to comment on Mr. Dobbs' situation?
I
would
agree with
like to-
Angelo that I think we should not fund this.
You want to
Let's do it.
include his penalties and fees in the payment plan, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, Frank?
If I could
I-
just briefly, Mr. Corbel and I did discuss this before this evening's meeting, and his recommendation would be that you stick to the policy as written for the time being. If you have desires to revise that policy, then that is suitable. We can look into that. It is,
So
close
we
to
would,
a decade old, but to at this point stick to the letter of what you have approved.
thank
I
you.
also have a question for the solicitor, if you don't mind, which is, if we were, first of all, it's not that I have a vote, but I do think that we should stick to our established policy, right? But my more important question would be, if we were to make if we were to make an exception, would that by default be kind of admitting some sort of fault in the matter? That's my bigger concern.
I don't think necessarily it would be admitting a fault. I do think in general, the deviation from how you typically treat one instance and taking a step that differentiates without any clear indication of a truly different set of facts could, cause some issues if you have a similar request down the line. I don't think you necessarily have a liability issue, but in
Right.
terms of having an established policy, it typically is best to, follow it to the letter as much as you can.
All
And
right.
we're happy to look at it if you'd like assistance in revising it.
Yeah, so our concern would be that we would add the penalty into the full amount owed and including the penalty and fees, and then allow a 100 a month payment plan for that total amount, not the discounted amount. Is that correct?
That would be my interpretation of your policy.
Okay, I think that would be the way we would proceed. Do we need to go to a vote of council to do that, or can we authorize staff
No.
to proceed in that regard? Okay. I would also like to request that this policy be remanded to Ops and Policy Committee for review and updating and evaluation for considerations. It hasn't been touched since 2013. I think we should evaluate whether circumstances and situations may have evolved that require a different approach to this. And that would include the availability of assistance programs that might be within the purview of council to recommend to people who request amelioration of fees or fines or defer it in payment. Would that go to Mr. Lawrence through the chair, or how do we do that, Mr. Morris?
Well, two things. If you look at the bottom of the policy, you can see numbers there. That was a policy written by Mr. Corbel and his associates at the time. So with council's direction and understanding, I mean, council asked for something at that time. So you could either have him directly take a look at it, unless there's specific things that you want to add. In that case, you might want to talk about it off some policy. That's up to you. And I have one other item I want to mention with
Yeah.
that, but I'll stop for that right now.
Mr. Lawrence, what's your pleasure with that regard? Do you want it in Ops and Policy, or should we send it to Mr. Corbel for review?
I think I'd rather see us have a discussion amongst ourselves before we send it off to Corporal.
All right.
I
so
think it deserves a second level of discussion.
Okay.
So if you could put that on the next Ops and Policy meeting for consideration, and let Mr. Corbel know that we're looking at this, please, and that we would like his advice on anything that we should consider while we're evaluating that again. And Jack,
Okay.
I'll leave this in your hands then.
All right.
The other thing I wanted to add to that was, this is an example of what I brought up months ago. If you recall, I gave you a list of policies and a spreadsheet as best I could. There are a lot of policies there that we are required to follow because they were approved by council at one time or another. And I don't know if, like this policy, those still apply. So among other things, you should make sure you take a look at that list again and see if there's anything you want to review so that you can update whatever. And I also wanted to, as a sidelight, mention that we do have an administrative manual, but it was written in 1991. And there are a lot of problems with that. We've talked about that in the past. At various times, various solicitors have said they were going to update them. To this point, nothing's happened. I'm not saying that's Mr. Corbel's fault. Don't get me wrong. I don't mean that. But nothing's happened. There's been discussion about it, but no direction. So I just want to mention that's another policy that is given to employees, and that's the only thing I have to give a new employee whenever they're hired. So I just want to mention that there's a whole bunch of policies that need to be reviewed.
Okay, that is outside the realm of the Finance Committee, other than it might require funding to do that. Are there grants available for policy updates, Mr. Morris? Do you know of any?
Not that I know of.
Okay. All right, that done, then I believe that concludes the business of the Finance Committee, unless anyone has anything they wish to raise in that regard. Okay. If not, Finance Committee is adjourned, and I return to the chair.
Okay, committee of the whole is up, and Ms. DeMarco as vice president. I guess you're running it. I'm okay to start the manager's update if you're ready.
Yes, please.
Okay, what I have is a couple of reminders and some other business. First, a reminder from the Tricog Land Bank. You had been sent a copy of a letter from the Land Bank back on June 2nd via email that they're acquiring a property at 388 Avenue F. And they sent that letter to determine if council had an objection to that. If not, they request that I sign a form that indicates the council agrees with the acquisition, and you would vote on it on March 20, I'm sorry, March, geez,
February, I mean.
June,
June
June 21st. Again, that the agreement does mean that you agree to waive taxes and tax claims, et cetera. But I didn't get any responses to anything that when we sent that out in the email. So I want to give you a chance here now if you don't like that, or if you do like it and want to vote on it on June 21st. I want to make sure it's on the agenda. So any issues with that anybody has, questions?
Any comments, questions, discussion? observation? Mr. Watkins?
I have a question. How much are we waiving in fees and taxes and revenue?
I don't have that. I don't think it was in the letter either.
Is there a ballpark estimate?
I believe that
No.
property is in default at this time.
We could provide an analysis of that if you'd like us to pull those numbers for you.
That would be helpful.
I'll put
I
a
think we
tentative.
need to know,
We
I
need
think we need to know that before we agree to anything like that.
Yeah, because this is a situation where when the land bank takes over the property, they do it with an eye to returning it to the tax base rather than demolishing it. On occasion, they have had to demolish properties, but I think this one is one that they're looking at turning. So it's to our advantage to have it taken into the land bank, have the title cleared, have it, repaired, refurbished, and put back on the market so that it will gain a property tax. So it isn't a loss to us. I
Yeah.
don't believe they are in, I believe they are in default on this property. I haven't had a chance to look at it immediately past.
Don't forget too that you folks, council agreed at one time to join the land bank.
Right.
You pay a fee to them. This is the idea of what they're supposed to be doing. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that,
Yeah, it would be helpful to know, the status of their taxes, but I believe they are in arrears, and I would like to put this on for a vote on June 21st, if possible.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I would have had it ready if I didn't get any feedback on it when we sent it out. So I didn't know that there was any issues. So I just let it go. Sorry about that. Anybody
No,
else? Go ahead.
That's all, please.
No, I'm in agreement with it. I think it's the most effective, one of the most effective uses for properties like this. But I'd just like to know if we're going on a deep dive tax-wise, or if this is just a moderate tax rate.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense.
It's a situation that we may already be in arrears on taxes, and this is a way to get them to return to the tax base.
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
it's a positive outcome for us.
Right. I'm just saying that I would have had something ready had I known that there was more. Anybody
Other
else
questions or
on that?
comments on this issue?
Okay, my next item really isn't worth discussing right now necessarily. Not that that's going to stop anybody, but because Walt Reamer is not available tonight, but I know he was working on a Facebook page and Instagram for the pool. And there were some concerns and objections raised about that to him personally. And he wanted me to mention it to you folks because he would like to know, what approvals you require and what limits and things like that you want to have for him. And I would suggest we better to talk directly with him, obviously, than to just talk about it in general now. But he asked me if I'd at least mention it because they were ready to go with something, and it was kind of put on hold.
Well, Mr. Morris,
Yeah,
actually, this is a discussion for council because we've talked about the having a social media policy. And one of the things that we need to look at is how the Facebook page is going to be used. We also have to get the old page taken down. And as far as Instagram accounts, I have a lot of problems with us having an Instagram account. We're posting photos. There are potential, and we have an attorney here, but there are potential problems with posting pictures of children on Instagram. I realize you can post photos that are taken in public. However, we have a responsibility since they're being taken at the pool, likely being taken by pool employees as well. So I would strongly suggest we do not authorize the use of Instagram. We can have a further discussion about Facebook and how that account is being handled. But certainly I would take Instagram out of the equation.
I agree. Anyone else have comment on this?
Yeah, I do, if I may.
Yeah. Oh, Jack, please, and then our attorney.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mr. Morris did send me and Angelo a sample or a draft of a social media policy. And last week I did ask Mr. Corbel's office if he would be able to find us any samples of social media policies used by municipalities, ones that come out of NPOs or private corporations don't address the issues that we have to. So, and we do have to have a written social media policy, but that's not going to be done quickly. I do want to bring up that this issue of anyone creating a Facebook page or a social media page without appropriate authorization is a dangerous way to go. And until we get a social media policy, I think we should stick with the idea that nothing would be created without the approval, at the very least, of the borough manager. So we can discuss that and wherever that needs to be discussed, but that's a concern of mine. Because once we cross that threshold and we'll start allowing someone to, even in the best of intentions, to create a social media page in behalf of the borough, we open ourselves to some serious problems. Thank you.
Ms. Stewart, you have comment, please.
You all are essentially exactly where our recommendation would be that, you know, there be no pages used for purported speech coming from the borough or a borough facility without updating to a more robust social media policy. I don't have examples with me this evening, but we can certainly continue to discuss and look at that issue if it's something you want to get more involved in. But it is an area where you have concerns not only over free speech and other issues of that nature, but you know, a contemplation of what portions of those are public records, what portions of those are speech of you all as council members. So it is something to be considered very closely before you authorize something of that nature.
I believe Mount Lebanon has a fairly robust social media policy. They also have a marketing manager, but it might be interesting to look at theirs, at least for some guidance. And I believe the local government academy also issued some guidance in one of their trainings or multiple of their trainings. And I know the municipal league has as well. I would be willing that at least until we've resolved this, that we recommend that Mr. Reamer not expand any social media beyond what we're already using, and certainly not to instigate an Instagram page of any kind. I would include Twitter in that regard.
Okay.
And Mr. Lawrence,
just
if you would be the appropriate place to be taking up under ops and policy,
Yeah,
a review of our social media communications policy. I understand you and Angela are already in that regard. Mayor Porco.
Just an
Okay.
additional thought. So I do agree that we should have a button down social media policy before we move forward with communication. And I think we need to take the appropriate steps to claw back the previous Facebook account that has been since hijacked. However, on the Instagram, just so people are aware, I believe the spirit behind that account was that's primarily how younger people communicate with one another. And the idea is driving attendance to the pool, to activities at the pool via that account. Apparently Facebook is for old people. I don't like that term because apparently that's being applied to me, but apparently that's pretty much the mindset. So just I don't know if that's something that we can kind of club through with the solicitor, but there's that was the spirit and the thought process behind it. So just an FYI on that as
Yeah.
we're kind of making our way through this process.
My concern is that the Instagram account is notoriously insecure regarding safeguarding the privacy and protection. We are a public agency. We are not a teenager. And we need to find effective ways to communicate to our young people and our younger citizens. But I'm not sure that we should be limited to rather leaky and insecure social media instruments like Instagram and Twitter. I think there would be, might have better choices. Certainly, I think we should look into it much more carefully before we go
Right.
really into adopting a new one. It's hard to get rid of these things once you've put them up.
On a lighter note,
Yeah.
and this Instagram is now not the place for the young people to go either. So we're all showing our age. The minute we know where people are looking, we're already out of date.
Yeah, they go to TikTok and some other stuff, which is even more bizarre.
Yeah.
So I don't think we even want to
So-
go there. Chat box.
Yeah.
My
All
granddaughter
right.
tried to send me something on that. I couldn't even find it. I said, Leah, send me a text or call me on the phone or write me a note. She can't write. It's like, I send things in script and they can't read them. So anyway, all right. I think we will leave that for further development. And we have the Woodland Hills Emergency Management Monthly
Okay.
Report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's under my report. So they didn't give me their report last week for public safety, but I did get it this morning. So I printed it and copied it onto your report for May now. And then I have a list of outstanding items. I just want to briefly go over this real quick, unless you have some discussion. I just want to remind you that last month you asked to review disposition of committee items, and Mr. Baiocchi was reviewing that. And whenever it's ready, I'm to include that on ops. The other issues, the rodent baiting program, you would ask the foreman to survey crew members to determine if anyone was willing to undergo certification, and otherwise we would solicit quotes for a contract. Jim informed me this morning that no one in the crew is interested in getting certified. So we'll work on soliciting quotes, and we'll see if there's any chance that any of that is under CoStars as well. Yeah, once I get back, we'll work on that to see if we can find anything. The last thing in public safety last week, I brought up the rhythm traffic signal maintenance agreement, and we ended up going down the road on a bunch of other stuff, and nobody really decided, are we going to do one of those two agreements? It's up at the end of the month, and I would need to have you vote on it. So I attached the first pages of the agreements to your agenda tonight, and you can see that it's attached to the committee, the whole agenda, that there was an agreement either for 5 years at $35,038.36 payable immediately for those 5 years, or there, and that would lock in your cost. And there was also the option of doing it year by year, with the first year costing $7,000, and then any future years would be dependent on whatever the situation was at that time. So I really didn't get any kind of a response. I know that Mr. Thielak at the time had mentioned that we use them a lot, and that this is the company that was used by PennDOT originally. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Kevin Brett or maybe no, it was Dave DeJoy, I think, mentioned that this was worth maintaining. I just need to know if you agree with that and what way you want to go with it. So if you could just tell me that before you go into any other thing with traffic issues.
The question is, can we afford to do the extended plan, considering what you said about the budget earlier.
Well, no, not from the budget, but you do have money budgeted for traffic maintenance this year. Then you could use that chunk. You could also take money from the budget reserve if you wanted to. And then hopefully in the future, we would pay the budget reserve back either next year or the year after. Excuse me.
I would like to see if we know anything about the risk of the increase in cost in the out years for this program.
What I'm told is that it will increase.
Yeah.
I believe David Joy mentioned that as well.
Exactly. Well, I think given that we do have traffic in the budget and that we would have to pay for it in subsequent years on an annual basis, I think it would be over a 5-year period, probably more cost efficient to do this as a one-time payment. If we can manage that financially, I think that would be the more prudent way to go forward. Does
Yeah,
anyone have
we-
any
we-
objection to that?
We budgeted for maintenance of traffic signals $17,000.
Yeah,
Now, we
exactly.
do use that and do need that,
Yeah,
obviously for certain things, but we do have that much in the general fund right now.
and I think this is something where we really can't not have this service because the maintenance of the state road things require that we have this.
Well, it's gonna be a problem because of the newer, more sophisticated signal system they have on there, which PennDOT has graciously said we are responsible for, so.
Right, another one of those unfunded mandates. But I think this is one of the things we really don't have, we have no other way to deal with this. We can't do this ourselves and there's no other option than to have it under contract. So I would recommend that we proceed to do this. Does anyone have any strong objections to that?
I agree. It's fine, Patty.
Good, all right, then.
I'll
do
put a
we-
motion on
Thank you,
for the 21st, and I will include on there where the money will come from, probably
you.
budget reserve and the general fund. But I will check with Allison too to see if there's any other money that we have budgeted somewhere else that I might be missing.
Okay, thank you, and
That's all I have.
okay. All right. Let me see here. I have no report from the council. Oh, the solicitor's report. Do we have a report from the solicitor, please?
Just some very brief notes to relay. First of all, I understand that you have looked at an update to your Environmental Advisory Council ordinance.
Yes.
I would ask that if you have any comments on them, we could discuss them. It could be put on the agenda for the next meeting. If you can provide any comments in advance of that, or we can discuss any potential legal issues in executive session next week as well. I'll be with you again next week, so we'll have some continuity there. The same thing with the panhandling ordinance. If there are any additional comments, that would be, proper to discuss in a potential executive session. Yes, Mr. Morris.
Yeah, if you could just let me know what kind of motion you want for both, whether you just.
Certainly.
Okay, thanks.
I can send that over. I did just want to add, this wasn't on my list, but I wanted to run the numbers on the potential solar ordinance. It will need to go before your planning commission for review as well and their recommendation. We could potentially still hit a August target, depending on if we can get a quorum for this month. I expect you will be able to, but I just want to make you aware that we will have
I would like to be able to speak at the planning and zoning board when they have that before them, so that they have a way to answer any questions about it and understand the full thrust of what we're doing.
So I think it would still be appropriate to put a motion on your business meeting for next week to get the ball rolling on that. And then we can do a full review, get it before the planning commission and provide an updated schedule based on their ability and your ability to be at that meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Those were the only items expressly on my list, but I'm here to answer any questions if you had outstanding questions for Mr. Corbel. I got a little bit of a briefing on some other outstanding issues, but those were the only ones directed to me to include in the report.
Right. Under committee business report, do we have any issues that we need to raise? As Council Vice President, I have two things I'd like to share with you. One, the EOS Energy group is having an open house on the 16th, on Friday from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. If any of you are interested in attending that open house at their Turtle Creek facility, I would like to know that so I can have your name given to the security clearance in advance of the tour. Is anyone available and interested in seeing that, Frank?
I'm sorry, what are the dates again?
It's this Friday, the 16th of June from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock in Turtle Creek at the RIDC Turtle Creek facility.
We're not committed to that entire 2 hours, are we?
No, I don't think so.
Then I'll attend.
Okay,
I can only come for the first hour.
no problem. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. I will make that known. The other thing I wanted to let you know is that we are now moved into the next phase in the Duquesne Light pilot grant for the pilot demonstration of a microgrid based on the installation of solar in our borough and especially in the business district. They are moving forward with their grant application and have included us as a pilot demonstration location, and we are very excited to be involved with that. This will engage Duquesne Light in monitoring and reporting on the effect of our solar installations, and if we get the EOS grant as well, on the battery backup of those solar installations, on the reliability and resilience of the grid of the electric system in this area, which, as you know, has been a subject of considerable attention. Our business community raised it as their single biggest concern regarding their energy system because power goes out frequently in the business district. So those are the only two things I needed to update you about. We have a fee resolution change, which is under discussion. I think that was attached to our agenda. Miss Morton, do you want to address that, please?
Yes, this was brought up at last week's meeting. We went through the resolution and simplified some of the pricing for the rentals for
Oops, you're
the
freezing.
Westinghouse and pool. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we missed about 2 words.
You're frozen again, Barb.
Yeah, she's frozen.
Okay, well,
There you go.
okay, real quick. If you have any questions, you have a copy of the new resolution. I'll be happy to answer anything.
Can I ask something real quick? Barb, are you there? Or are you frozen?
She's there.
Okay, well, what I wanted to ask you was what you have highlighted in
You
there
have.
are the.
Mr. Morris?
Yeah, what you have highlighted in there are the changes. That's the wording you want to use that's highlighted,
That's
correct?
correct, yes.
Okay, because if you're gonna put that on for approval at the meeting, I can just write up the resolution amendment, because I've done that before. And I would insert these changes. I say usually, I don't know if it's a big deal. In the past, when Mr. Corbel has done it or Anna has done it for him, they usually show deletions in there with crossouts, and then they show the added amount. Now, this is a resolution. I'm not sure if it's critical to do that or not. Does it make a difference, Anna?
It's not necessarily critical. We tend to just pick a format for general consistency so that if people look at one document that's revised and they look at another, it's using the same form. But
Okay.
so long as you have a delineation within your resolution that indicates what you're doing by which
Well,
symbol.
what I could do then is just say, for example, that the entirety of section 19 is deleted and just put in the whole language that you have here, old and new, for section 19. And then I think you have something changed in section 21. Yes, you do. So I would just put in the same thing there. The
Mhm.
only issue I have other than that, Barb, is that on page 23, item D, you have one thing highlighted, the word here, and there's a big gap. I'm not sure if something's missing there or that should be included, or if that's
Um,
just a mistake.
No, it's not a mistake. I did that. There was some, the way it was worded, it just seemed inconsistent. It said, the information is found in it was referencing itself. It seemed like circular. So I just said, it's found here in the resolution. So, I mean, if you don't think that's correct, then you could change it, but that's why it says here.
So you mean,
There shouldn't have been a gap. My copy looked okay.
is there something after that that was deleted, you're saying, or no?
It said it's the information is found in the resolution. And rather than say it's found in the resolution, I just said it's found here because the information was directly below it.
All right, I'll look at it and I'll write it. Well, you don't have to have, you've already seen this, so you don't need to have the full resolution given to you. All you need is a motion to approve it. So if I don't have it all written, because I'm out the next couple of days, if I don't have it all written in time, I can double check the old one and just make sure that it's updated. The main thing is to have the motion on there to approve it.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
And it looks like most of these are updates and are allowing for electronic payment, which wasn't in the resolution before, which is significant. So,
That's correct.
okay. Does anyone have any concerns or objections, or is this good to go? We're good to go. All right.
Thank you.
The next issue is the firehouse windows. Barbara, you going to address that as well?
Yes. Mr. Morris, would you be able to show the three estimates for the pool? For the fire hall windows?
Yeah, let me just find out where I put that. That was a Word file? Or was that yeah, no, that's no, never mind. Wait a minute. Yeah, I have it. Hold on a second.
I think I sent that as a PDF.
Yes, it is a PDF.
Okay. So here we go. Okay, so I'll page through this at your direction, Barb. You just let me know. This is the first proposal you have here. You want me to stop there for a minute?
So it's,
Okay, we're replacing the windows at the fire hall. This estimate is for 12,700.
Okay,
That company there, he's replacing the windows with thermo twin windows.
mhm.
They're going to be, I believe they're aluminum.
that's the
And-
first proposal, Rick? The one I'm
Yes.
showing now? Okay.
Yes, and he's also doing the EMS windows with the same style windows as we are doing. That's how I got his name. He's a resident of Swissvale that he comes out and does, but he's doing the windows up at the EMS station as well. The windows in the firehouse on the second floor are from 1986. And as Miss Martin already saw, that a lot of them don't open, or you can't open them. The cranks are all broken and everything. And what we're proposing on the windows is not getting the casement type windows, but getting sliders. So if you drive past the firehouse where you see two windows, one will slide into the other. It's all the same size. There's no structural work or anything. And where there's four windows, the two will slide into one. So keeping the same amount of windows and everything, but just changing the style that we're doing.
Okay, so there's the first quote, and I'll page down to the
That's
second
12,000
quote.
That's 12,700.
Whoops. There's the second quote from McCormick Renovations.
It ends up being 13,015. If I know it's kind of hard to scroll down, but there were a couple of other fees down
Oh,
below.
okay, there we go.
That's it. There we go. Thank
Okay.
you. And we have one more.
Oh, yeah, wait a minute. Let me see. I don't know if I didn't realize this was changed. I mean,
This one's for
sideways.
14,578.
There we go, I think.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Is that all you needed then to show?
Yes, what happened is initially the windows were part of the Siemens contract, but they didn't allow enough expense in the envelope fees. So we decided that we'll pay for these, the borough, and then any savings will go towards the Public Works windows for their envelope. So should we put the 12,700 for next week for approval? Or can we just say yes, no?
We have the fire department window replacement budget in our budget book for 2023. I believe is carried over from 2022. Is that correct, Mr. Morris? We did not spend
Yes.
money in
yes.
2022. So we do have this in the existing 2023 budget for improvements to the window replacement for the volunteer fire department. It is in the budget and it's
Yep.
under the number that we have listed here.
Yeah, and I believe that number was 30,000 in
That
the,
is correct. That is
Yeah,
correct.
and you haven't spent enough for 2023 in capital budget
Right.
that you wouldn't have the money to do that now if that's a decision. For future things, you'd have to review, but for
But this one
you-
is in the budget and was allocated for this purpose. So I think we are okay.
Well,
this-
capital improvements budget is not final.
I know, I
Okay.
understand, Steve. What I'm telling you is that we have looked at it and we've made estimates and this is within our capability in terms of what we have on hand. So do we have a recommendation to take Thermo Twin for this bid, or is there any reason to consider a higher bid for some reason?
I think we should take it.
The Thermo Twin, okay.
Yes.
So can we put a recommendation to that effect on the motions for this month's meeting then?
And last week, Chief Colella, when you weren't present, there were questions about not only the doors, but the painting estimates. If anyone had any questions for Chief Colella now, if you can remember those. I know they were a little confusing, especially for the doors. One company had 3 estimates on.
yeah, the first estimate I got was they were gonna replace the doors with aluminum doors with full glass. And he had put 3 doors on his estimate. After I called the second vendor, who is Davis Fetch, who we've used previously for doors in the borough, they did the borough Public Works doors and everything, who I'm happy with that. He looked at the third door and he said, this door does not need replaced. He said, even though I'd like to sell you one, he said, you don't need to replace it. It just needs cleaned up and painted and it's perfectly fine. The door that we're proposing is the main entrance door, who had some work done, and when the sun hits the door, it bakes it and expands it, and you have to sort of hit it with your knee and try to bang on it to get it to open when it unlocks.
Not a
because of
good
the
idea.
expansion. But that he was going to replace it with the same style door that's on the Public Works garage with the half window, which we're happy with that because, you know, the full glass, we don't need that. And it'll make everything look uniform in the compound down here. So all the doors will look the same. It'll still be the brown exterior with a half window with the mesh in it. And then the other door is in our trough in the back, which also had some repairs made. And that door is from 1965 when they built the building. And it has air leaks in it, and it's not a good door. It's rotting around the edges. So, and that's just a full slab metal door that they're replacing that with all the appropriate hardware and the same locks that we have. And I think the Davis Fetch estimate was like $8,700.
Yep.
Which is well under what was budgeted in the capital improvement budget for the doors, I believe also.
It's 8,000 in the budget, but that's fine. We're good, because the windows are under. Yes.
He was what, 8,700, I think, for the doors?
So
And
are
that-
we good to go with that too?
It's within the budget. I think that would work.
Well, again, you guys aren't listening to me. It's
I
in the
know what-
capital plan,
Yes.
but the capital plan has a lot of things in there that you can't afford. So you just have to realize, just because it's in there doesn't mean that you have the money for it necessarily. So yes, right now at this point in time, you do. Okay, but if you look at the way the budget was, one of the things is for 2024, not 2023. Okay, that was the windows, and that was what was given to me when we did the budget. I'm not saying you can't move it, you can, but just please, please don't misunderstand when you look at the capital improvements plan, what you have there.
Mr. Morris,
Steve, what
My-
I was looking at was that in 2022, we allocated 50,000 for window replacement. We didn't spend it in 2022.
Yeah, that's still what I say still holds.
Mr. Morris, but Public Works windows, which is in the capital budget for this year, will be paid for by Siemens. So
I'm
that-
not saying don't do it. I'm not saying you can't move money around. Yes, you can. I just get
Got it.
a little concerned when people. You're allowed, you can do what you want to do with the fire windows and the doors. Don't worry about it. That's fine.
All right. Have we resolved both of
Kalala.
those issues? Have we resolved both of those issues? We're going to do thermo twin for the windows and we're going to do fescue for the doors. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone have any objections to that or have serious concerns we can't afford that this time?
No objections.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Do we need a resolution on the voting business meeting for this, Mr. Morris?
For the windows and the doors, you need
Yeah.
a motion to approve whatever you're going to
The
spend money on.
contractor. Okay.
So
we-
right now, the only one you told me for sure was the window bids. Are we doing anything else? Is just one motion?
We're doing the doors well.
Okay. And which contractor are we taking with the door?
Fescue.
I'm sorry?
Fescue for $8,700.
Davis Fetch.
Fetch, I'm sorry.
Davis Fetch.
I didn't
Okay, that-
quite hear you. Yeah.
That will be a separate motion, and I'll have that.
Okay, and then there were some concerns about the painting, if we're done with those two.
Well, we could revisit, the painting it's needed, but we could revisit that after looking at it and
Yeah.
we need to get some good measurements on the replacement wood and stuff that was neglected the last time it was painted. The short building, the one-story building was painted, I believe, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. The second story building hasn't been painted for about 15 years. And the wood is deteriorating, but we could revisit that and look at some other materials or get a better idea of what we need to do with that instead of, it was an afterthought after the painting bids came in about after we walked around and looked at the wood, needing wood replaced. So we can put that on the back burner and reconfigure and look at that.
That would be appreciated. Thank you.
So,
Thank
yeah,
you, Chief Colella.
it's nothing that needs your immediate attention right now, but we can revisit that even if we wait till next year.
Okay, thank you. The next issue is the ball field use and permitting. Whose issue is that?
That was mine.
Okay, Mr. Beal.
So as we were going through the fee resolution, I noticed the ball field permitting at $100 per season. It's not clear to me what the process, and if someone knows, please let me know. What is the process for ball field permitting and how is it done? Who's responsible for that?
It had been, the chair of the rec, board, Barry Layton, who would get any submissions on ball field use. Now, there also was at one time, where we talked about this last week with borough property, where people could rent ball fields if they had something going on at the lodge. Now, Walt advised, I think, that should be broken out of there and separated. But it can now go to Mr. Reamer. It just depends on, what council's pleasure is as far as that's concerned.
Well, when we were looking at the rentals, we removed the ball field rental from, or ball field use from the rental. So it would be a separate issue. But again, my question is, seems like there would be multiple people wanting to use the ball fields. I noticed that there are teams that play there. And so I wonder, what is our policy? What is the process for renting or permitting the fields for a season? So that's my first question. I don't think it should be anyone but a borough employee that's doing that, because that seems inappropriate. And there's another follow-up to that too. The ball fields that we have, well, we have a field at the main park. Is that used for baseball? And if it is used for baseball, that seems to be an issue with me, in that somebody hits a ball, it's going out into traffic. So I thought mostly I usually see people playing soccer there. So is that the case? And we are not using it for baseball, or we do use it for baseball, and we're taking a risk?
We don't officially use it for baseball. The Westinghouse fields are what are used for baseball. If somebody has a picnic there and they play baseball there, that's up on them. Soccer does use it.
Well, I would like to make a recommendation that we limit the use of that field for soccer only, that we remove that batting cage so we don't encourage that, and that we put up appropriate signage to say that it's for soccer use only. And then we take a hard look at, with Mr. Reamer, as to how the ball fields are being permitted. Does anyone have any other concerns or comments about what I am proposing?
I agree.
Okey-dokey, I did it. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Lawrence, go ahead.
I was going to say, I just agree with everything we discussed. That's fine.
Barb?
Yes, I agree as well. I think an employee should be handling it. And I'm not really sure what how the fee structure is set up. And just out of a general curiosity, I'd like to know about that as well. Thank you.
And we asked Mr. Reamer to give us a recommendation in this regard, Mr. Morris.
Yep.
And probably do it at, do you want it at public safety? For our
Pardon
next
me?
committee meeting? Angela, do you want this on public safety at your next?
I mean, I don't think that it belongs
should be borough
necessarily under
property.
public safety.
Borough
but
property? Okay,
Borough property, yes.
all right. Then we'll put that on the agenda for Borough Property Committee for disposition at Mr. Reamer's report. Okay, modification of recent Earth Day participation waiver for other borough events. I don't know, is that Angela? Is
Yeah,
that?
that's me. At a previous meeting, Mr. Corbel suggested that we modify the waiver for all types of events that the borough might conduct, making it a little more generic, so that we could use it for all different activities as needed. So I would just like to push that off to the solicitor to review.
So we did speak about that briefly with Mr. Corbel, and we were just like, there are a few options you can go with. You can have a signed written waiver that is just a generic, you hand out, everybody takes it and signs, and you collect the signatures. there also are ways to work a similar waiver into if you have an online reservation system for any events, for any rentals and things like that, where we could work the waiver into, submission of a permit request or things of that nature. So if you just have, some ideas on how exactly you'd like it to be effectuated, we can start working on the language, but it might need a little bit of tweaking based on how you want to get it signed.
Yeah,
Right.
currently the way we were looking at it is if we have any events that are being sponsored by one of our committees or the borough itself, usually it's a in-person signing of the waiver. But your suggestion about incorporating that into an online reservation system, which we're working on now as well, would be a good one.
I like that idea.
May I?
Yeah, Jack.
Yeah, that brings up a good point. I think when we originally thought about this, we were thinking about those Earth Day type activities and, the committees and organizations are sponsoring something. And I think a generic version of the Earth Day waiver is what we were looking at. And I think that is one road that we'd like you to go down. You have brought up a very interesting point. I don't know what's in the contracts for anything that if we're going to an online system renting various things, I think the waiver is going to be probably rather dramatically different from what we were talking about. So my suspicion is that's going to be a significantly different document, and I wouldn't think you want to try to mesh the two. That's my thought. Anybody else on that one?
Well, Mr. Porco, do you have a comment? No. I know that, for example, when you use university facilities for an event, you sign a waiver with the contract for use of that space that limits their liability to, whatever. I think it would be simply, it would be a simple thing to add it to the contract for limited liability for use of our facilities. We also have a blanket notice, for example, in our borough meeting room that says, be aware that, these meetings are recorded. You're on notice that you may appear on, the recording if you're in the meeting, that kind of thing. We could post that in our major facilities for things where we don't want to have a specific limited liability. For example, I was thinking we had people out chopping knotweed. Are we going to have to get, waivers of liability for everybody who participates in that kind of activity as a volunteer service project? How far do you want to go with this thing? I think putting it in the reservations for use of facilities is more than adequate for most things.
Right, but
I didn't agree that we needed it for Earth Day, for example.
well, yeah, again, we discussed that and we kind of went down that road already in that we have somebody, as you said, chopping down knotweed at our behest. If they get injured, we share some liability in that. And I think Mr. Corbel had already pointed that out. So I think while we don't want to burden people with unnecessary paperwork, but I think it's something that we should require.
I'd like to say something. I've done a lot of volunteer work, and when people show up, they're asked to sign the waiver. Usually it's explained that the attorney demands it, or should I say requests it, and it doesn't look so bad for the person that's running it. For myself, it's the knotweed, and I have concerns with that as well. People are using clippers and different implements, so I think it's a good idea if we could get something like that going.
Okay.
You.
All right.
I guess I'd just like back to my point that the document that we would use for these events may be different than the document that we use for the facility rentals. That's all I was saying.
Yes, that's for sure.
Okay. So can we propose that we ask the solicitor to draft two different documents for the two different goals?
We certainly can do that if that's what you would like. That no problem at all.
I think look at it in a way that would make the most simple approach for each situation and make it appropriate to the relative situation involved. I think no point making this any more complicated than it needs to be. Okay, and you'll report back to that to us.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, we have an item on the safety of parks, fencing, routine safety inspections. I presume that's Angelo's, yes?
Yes, it is. I had a number of parents contact me about their concern about safety in our parks. And they have small children who have a tendency to run off, and they have several children that they're trying to work with. And they had asked about the possibility of putting fencing around those areas. I kind of tend to agree with them. I did some research. There are a few laws that are from the state of Pennsylvania, which I'd like to explore further, but they address safety for parks. And the recommendation is that there's a Consumer Product Safety Commission, and they have an entire booklet on safety of parks and how to maintain those parks. And one of them includes incorporating fencing around any of those playground areas. So that's one of the things that I would like to explore further. I would like to include Mr. Reamer in that. And as part of that, I think that if we don't have a policy, and I couldn't find one where we look at doing inspections, safety inspections of our parks on an ongoing basis, at least yearly, that we need to develop that kind of safety policy. So we look at the equipment, make sure that it's in good working order, that the equipment that we do have there meets all the safety guidelines, et cetera, et cetera. So if there's no objection, I'd like to push this to Mr. Reamer, along with Mr. Morris's participation to get this going.
I understand Public Works does inspections of the park equipment and safety equipment every season before opening it. I recall Mr. Delacker's reports to that effect. But
Yes.
certainly we can look at it, in terms of safety inspections and so on.
Yeah, I want to make sure that they're following the Consumer Product Safety Guidelines, and so that whatever report that they're following, or whatever report they're producing, that they share that with council, so that we know what the recommendations are, if there are any.
Right, so would that be remanded to Mr. Morris to implement with Mr. Reamer and to report to Public Safety Committee? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments on that matter? Okay, thank you. If not, do we have a report from the Environmental Advisory Council?
No, they have not met yet.
Okay, Tree and Shrub Committee?
Report, they meet.
Oh, they meet after we do. Okay. Any other issues that we need to take up tonight that were moved from other committees that we need to address this evening? Okay, hearing none, I suggest that we may adjourn for the evening unless anyone has any-
Tomorrow.
Go to the order. What? Tree and Shrub meets tomorrow?
She's frozen. I believe that's
I
what she
know.
was saying.
Yeah, they meet tomorrow.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the order? In which case, I declare this meeting adjourned and I wish you all a good evening.
Not everybody.